Okay, so I had a request to demo how to deal with the node view and compositing in general. So I'm going to break that down into a couple of different demonstrations. I'm not exactly sure if I'll be using this shot for all of them, but I figured I'd use it for this one. And so as you can see here, I have it inked and painted. Well, actually, this was inked and painted by Jaden Picard. Thank you so much. I did the roughs for this shot, and she did the ink and paint. And I figured this could be a good shot to demo with a composite because this is basically has all the basics of what what a shot would have. It's got a character. I don't have a background for this shot in particular just yet. It'd probably have a really simple background because it's a close-up. But it's a good candidate, and this is a shot that has lots of moving parts. Now, in your animation, you may or may not break the character down into multiple layers, but that's something that is very frequent in this particular project. So that's also something that we would have to work with. Now, when you first go into the node view may not show up here. I have it docked here because I'm frequently using the node view. But you can call the node view by going to the plus sign in really any of the docks. It doesn't have to be any particular panel, but you can hit the plus and then go to node view. Now, once you have the node view in here, in fact, when I was first learning how to use the node view, this is sort of the screen that I would have it in. But as you can see, it's pretty small, and you have to zoom in really tightly in order to see anything. So if you wanted to dock it somewhere else, you can go over to the little shaded little area on top here, left mouse down and drag, and then you could pop it wherever you want it to go. And I don't really have a need to have two node views side by side at the same time, but as you can see, it's just a show of concept. So I'm going to exit that one out. Okay, so when you first open up your node view, yours may not look like mine. Mine kind of looks like a tree. Yours is probably going to look like someone took a box of Legos and just dumped them everywhere. So if that's the case, all you have to do is select all of them and then go over here to what looks like a pyramid of squares. Now, if this is not showing up for you, because it may not, you can move your cursor to the right of the word top up here on the left corner, right mouse click, and go to node view and click on that. Mine has a check because mine's already been selected. Now, you also might see that some are red and some are blue. Now, that may or may not be the case for yours. Red is not a bad thing, even though that color can look alarming. Red just means that it's an inactive layer. And in this particular case, it's for the most part the sketch, the initial sketch of the rough animation of this action. So you may or may not want to keep them. I do tend to keep all of my rough sketches. I like to if possible, but I probably don't want to have all of them hanging out over here on this composite because that can make things a little bit confusing. So if you do want to take some and just kind of move them away, I'm doing that by left mouse down and dragging. Again, if you are just deleting your sketch layer or it's not a billion layers and you're fine with keeping them where you are, then this is something you don't really have to worry about. But if I want to move them away and kind of keep them out of trouble, I can move them all up here. And then I could take what looks like these wire cutters, left mouse down and drag. And now none of them are connected to the composite anymore. And I'm going to select all these and hit Command G, and that just moves them away. It just puts them in a group by themselves. And there we go. And I'm just going to call this. You can hit the little square, yellow square, in order to rename. So I'm renaming it Sketch. And I can go into a little bit more thoroughly if I wanted to have this set up so that I could have it toggle on and off. I didn't really set it up that way. I'm just moving it aside for now, just to keep it out of trouble. So it doesn't look as overwhelming when we get here. So now we have a tree that's a little pruned. It's not as, maybe not as scary looking. Now as I select these, you can kind of see some onion skinning, and that's just because I was just making some adjustments to this and I had onion skinning on. So that's all that means. Okay, so let's come a little closer and let's take a look and see what this all represents. So here we have from left to right the names of the different layers. And they correspond to the up and down. That's not always the case, but that's typically the case. So inks is all the way to the top here, left here. That also means that it is in front. Bangs, then the bandana, the mouth, and so on and so forth. They correspond. And if you start doing anything that's a little bit complicated in terms of, like if you're doing a character puppet and you're sandwiching layers, or you start messing around a lot with the parenting of the layers, you might run into the layer order no longer matching the node view. But it should match right now. Okay, so they're all plugged into what's a slightly darker blue node that's called Composite. So a composite is the combination of all of the drawings, or all of the elements. Not everything's a drawing. This is a color card. If I hit the D key, it goes away. But everything else are drawings. So it combines them all together. And below Composite, you have Display and you have Write. Now, Display is what we see. So if I unplug this, everything is gone. It looks like I erased everything. Nothing's erased, it's just no longer viewable in our camera screen. So it's kind of like if the Composite was your DVD player and your display was your TV. If you don't have it plugged in, your DVD player could be playing all day long, but you're not going to see any of it, you're not going to hear any of it because it is not connected. So I can plug that back in. Now, this can be kind of handy as a way of viewing parts. So let's say I just wanted to look at her hair. So things like that. You can even have more than one display. So if I were to hit the Enter key, which allows you to call on other nodes, and I can type in display, I can actually have multiple display nodes. I can have multiple display nodes in the same document. So what happens? Well, as you can see, it's just showing the first display. If you want to change that, I have it set up so that I can change this whenever I want to, but yours might not be set that way by default. So you can move your arrow to a gray area. It doesn't have to be up here. I think you could do it down here as well. But just right mouse click and go to display. Where that's handy is if you're trying to track, let's say, special effects. You have some effects going on and it's not quite looking the way you want and you're not sure why, or you're doing something like particles, something advanced. That can be helpful with troubleshooting what you're telling each node to do, because then you can see some of them in isolation. So the Write node, now up until now, depending on how you like to work, you might have been exporting by just going to File, Export Movie, and that's fine. However, sometimes you may want to export as special settings that are not available under Movie. So for example, it comes up in some of my projects where I need to export it as a ping 4, which ping 4 just means ping with alpha. And in that case, I do need to use the Write node. So I click on the Write node and I can change it. And again, there's a lot of different options. It's just ping 4 is the most common for me in my projects. It's kind of like the render view, or I think it's called render view, or render settings in Maya. Reminds me of that a little bit. And so once you have it set, you can go to export and you can render Write nodes. So if you want to change it so that you have the Write node connect to something else, you can do that. Now, what can be pretty handy about this? So Composite itself, again, just treats the layers like they're combined. So if I had wanted to separate the character from the background, I'll just treat the color card like a background. If I want to treat the character separately from the background and do effects to the character only, and I don't want to have to do it to every single layer individually, I just want to say, hey, I want to, let's say, blur it. I want to blur all of the character and nothing else, not the background. I can do that. So to do that, I would want to isolate the character from the background. I'd want the composite to belong to only the character. So I'm going to hit the composite, the little yellow square, and I'm going to call it LRK because her name is Larkspur, and spelling that out can be lengthy. So sometimes I'll just call it by an acronym of that character's name, so LRK. And I'm going to hit Enter, and I'm going to type in Composite. Combine. So this would be the scene composite, let's say. And I can plug in Larkspur's composite to this one, and I can plug in this one into the display and this one into the Write node. And I can take the color card and I can plug it into Composite, and I'll make the color card appear again. So now, if I want to do an effect to only her and not the background, I can just put in whatever effect I want to do in between these two. Now, so far I've been calling the nodes by hitting the Enter key because I happen to remember the name of these particular nodes. However, if you're not working with nodes very often yet and you don't remember their names, you can go into the node library. So I always have the node library docked over here on the upper right side. If you do not have it there, which it may not be there by default, you can just go to the plus sign and click on node library. So we'll just do a blur. So I'm going to click on blur or type in blur, and I usually use blur Gaussian. I know some of these a little better than others. I'm a simple lady, so I'm just going to do blur Gaussian. And now if I want to automatically connect this, so I can connect it like this, and then pull out the other one. That would work just fine. I'm going to undo. There's a quicker way. And a lot of times when you're working in a big production that's going to have lots of shots, the quicker you can do things, the better off you'll be, because then, let's say you're making a steady amount per shot or for the whole project, if you get it done quicker, then you're really making more money per hour than if it took a long time. So a hotkey to kind of slide this in here is on a Mac, it's the Option key. On a Windows, I'm gonna guess that it's maybe like the Control or the Alt. It's in that area, under the Shift or near the Shift and near the space bar. It's one of those buttons if you hold it down. All right, so you're not gonna notice a difference. Now, that's because by default it's at 0. So I'm gonna change it to, let's say 5. Now, you may or may not see a difference right away. I'm not sure if it'll show on here. I think I have to be in this mode. Now, this is also something to keep in mind because I make this mistake all the time. But here, this is some of the effects that we do on here are not visible in the regular viewing mode that we've been probably working with most of the time when we're animating. This mode that we're normally working with is called OpenGL. It's kind of like a preview mode. And for all intents and purposes, it does look like what the final product's going to look like until we start using effects. Now, if you want to see what the effect would actually look like, we're going to want to go into Render View. There we go, nice and blurry. So, and if I hit the D key for deactivate, it will be crispy because I'm no longer it's no longer active. So again, red just means that it's deactivated. And let's take the hair back, and I'm just going to plug it in here just to show you that, see, it is affecting everything that's in this particular composite. I can plug it back in. So that's pretty handy. So if there's anything that you ever want to do that says, hey, I want to apply this thing to this whole drawing or this whole part of the drawing, you can do it by using composites. It's really, really handy. I love it. And it's going to be something that's going to come up pretty often, most likely in some of the future tutorials coming up. But I hope that this was a sort of a handy explanation. It's just a very beginner's little introduction to compositing. If you have any questions or if there's anything that you would like me to go into more thoroughly in compositing, let me know. And I'm going to try to make a couple more videos that spotlight a couple of different techniques that you can use with compositing, like if you want to put shadows, put highlights, and we did some blurs in here, but maybe a depth of field change. But let me know what you'd like to see, and I'll try my best to keep that in mind in the upcoming tutorials. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful.